It's the boy, Bubba, let's coming through. Hella clutch, flawless, can't be touched. It's your boy, Bubba, let's. Yeah, I need that hot take. I need the truth and everything that is not fake. So tell me.
Hello, Bubba Bunch, and welcome back to another episode of the Bubba Lutz Sports Podcast. It is episode 203, the second episode of 2020, and we are previewing the super wild Wildcard Weekend in the NFL. Games on Saturday, games on Sunday. Let's preview them all. Now, I was wanting a guest for this episode, and I had someone in mind. They had to unfortunately cancel at the very last minute. So we're just gonna go with the flow here. We're gonna make this a shorter episode. We always say that, but with me being by myself, you don't want to hear me talk for over an hour. No one ever does. So let's just get to the point. Let's get to these games because I'm more intrigued by the games on Sunday. I think the games on Sunday will be more telling of contenders in both of these conferences, while the Saturday games, there's only one standout, really. But I do feel like the games on Saturday will be more interesting to watch. I just feel more invested in the teams and the players on Sunday. Now, we're going to start off the Saturday games with the Bills versus the Colts. And yes, the Bills are the closest thing we have to a contender in the AFC alongside the Chiefs. And the Bills are just on fire right now. The hottest team in the NFL. They've won like 6 straight, 9 out of the last 10 they've won. The only loss came against the Arizona Cardinals and that immaculate catch by DeAndre Hopkins at the very last second. But other than that, they have been playing really great football, and they finished off the regular season with a 56-26 win over the Miami Dolphins, who was needing a win to get in. So just a great performance out of this Buffalo Bills this year. And do you get the sense that it's just feeling like the 90s teams, like everyone's believing in them? The Bills Mafia is just all behind them. There's a quarterback that is becoming the face of the franchise, and he's a gunslinger. He's a gun-ho guy. Jim Kelly to Josh Allen. I just get the sense that this is something special in Buffalo. And I feel like everyone as a NFL fan base can agree on that. There's something going on in Buffalo that we can't really put our finger on it, but when we look back at this, we're going to say these are the moments where the Buffalo Bills really turn their franchise around. And to go 13-3 this season, to come close to that number 1 seed, but only being behind the Kansas City Chiefs by just a small margin. I looked at some of the stats too. In total offense, the Buffalo Bills were 10 yards less total than the Chiefs this year. And they were at 396 yards per game, while the Chiefs were like 415. The Chiefs were the only team this year that averaged more than 400 yards a game. But right behind them was the Buffalo Bills. And, I mean, you can't really explain how good this offense is. And I feel like they can still work on it as well. Look, the passing game is their number 1. They don't have the best offensive line in football, but they make it work, and it's holding with Josh Allen in the pocket. Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, these guys are getting it done with their yards after the catch, and executing every drive to earn those points. And that's what gets them 56 points against the Miami Dolphins. Now, this defense is just reliable, efficient, physical, tenacious, and it's all because of Sean McDermott. Sean McDermott is most likely going to win Coach of the Year after Brian Flores did not make the playoffs. So this whole group is just fascinating to watch. I do think from a few weeks ago, I did say that the only thing really missing for the Buffalo Bills to make them true contenders is the running game. I feel like more consistency through Devin Singletary and Zach Moss would benefit them tremendously long term, because we start to see a lot of these other teams in the AFC to where their running game may not be their vocal point right now, but later on in the season to where maybe quarterbacks aren't as, I guess, lucky to have a great game passing wise, yards wise, that you have a backup and you can rely on that to earn time of possession and do what the Tennessee Titans did last year, to where they control the ball and they stay on that field for 8 to 10 minutes because Derrick Henry is forcing that ball down the field. But that play action setup for Ryan Tannehill is perfect. I feel like a lot of these teams, including the Buffalo Bills, would benefit from that if they get more effort and just more performances out of Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. So going into this game, I think the Buffalo Bills are without a doubt the favorite in this game, and I think Vegas would agree with me on that. When we look at the Colts, I've been just unsold on the Indianapolis Colts for one reason and one reason only, is Phillip Rivers. And this is the game that's going to prove it. Now, I thought they would have more of a favorable matchup based on how good they were during the regular season, but still fine with the Tennessee Titans to get in with the divisional title in the AFC South, the wild card. This is the worst case scenario for the Indianapolis Colts, because I felt like if they went against the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think the Indianapolis Colts would have won that game. And I think that was the matchup a few weeks ago in week 15, week 16. But due to the circumstances going on in week 17, they fell to face the number 2 seed, which is the Buffalo Bills, which is the worst thing you can do right now. You don't want to go against this team that is 9 out of 10 in their last 10 games, and they are red hot. Red hot. There's no way that you're stopping them under 30 points, right? The Colts have averaged and allowed 21 points per game. Well, you want to know another team that allowed only 21 points this year on defense? It was the Miami Dolphins. That didn't really work out for them. I do like the Indianapolis Colts as a football team. Frank Reich is an amazing coach, and he's done really great things with the defense. That defense is just very nice. Like, it gets the job done. And listening to some of the guys on 105.3 The Fan, the local radio station, they were saying how the Colts are just boring. They're a good football team, but they're boring. They're very balanced. You don't really have the flash or that spark on offense. It's just a good, reliable team. On offense, you have Jonathan Taylor, some really good weapons on the outside, and you have a veteran quarterback. Cool. And plus, you have a great offensive line led by Quentin Nelson, an all-pro player. And so it really works out. You wish that Andrew Luck would have been on this team, because I felt like things would have been different if Andrew Luck would have stayed in the NFL. And if he would have had the team that Phillip Rivers really was given, I felt like 11-5 would be below average of what I expect out of the Colts. But with Andrew Luck, I think they would have been Super Bowl contenders without a doubt. But they have Phillip Rivers now. Their defense is really good, and they've been performing all year long. But I'm telling you, man, if I'm Frank Reich and I'm just pregame in the locker room, I'm sitting down with Phillip Rivers and I'm saying, just hand it off to Jonathan Taylor. That's going to be our game plan. You don't have to be the hero. We're going to come to a point to where this game is going to be tight, where it's going to be back and forth. We're going to start trading touchdowns, or it's going to be late in this game when we still have a chance to win. I want you, Phillip Rivers, to say, it doesn't rely on me, because that has been the epitome of his career. He thinks he has to be the hero. He has to make the big play. Every time that's happened over the last few years. And one of the reasons why the Chargers never got past really the wild card round or the divisional round in his entire career is because of Phillip Rivers. He thinks he has to do too much, and he ends up doing too much for his own good. That's going to be the ultimate factor for the Colts this season. Whether they beat the Bills and they move on, which will be the biggest upset I think I've seen in a very long time, and they go against the Chiefs or the Ravens, whatever the case may be, you just cannot rely on Phillip Rivers to be the guy. You run through Jonathan Taylor, because he is a dynamic guy who everyone thought was gassed out after college. Well, he's not. Hines is a great setup piece alongside Taylor as well. It's kind of like a Nick Chubb to Kareem Hunt setup in Cleveland. So those are two dynamic bats that you can use in many different facets of this offense. Look, I love T.Y. Hilton this season. He has not been at the superstar level we've seen in previous years, but I do feel like he's finding his rhythm in this offense. And plus, Michael Pittman Jr. is really good. Zach Pascal, these guys are really good. So not to discredit the Colts whatsoever, but the Bills are just that damn good. And I feel like we're going to come to the point of this game to where Phillip Rivers has to do something special, and he will fall short. So when we look back at this on Monday and we're reviewing these games, I know for a fact, deep in my heart, there's going to be one moment in this game to where Phillip Rivers screws it up for the Indianapolis Colts and the Buffalo Bills move on. I don't think this will be necessarily close, but I do feel like in a moment to where it can change the momentum of the game, Phillip Rivers will fall short. So, first game of Super Wild Card Weekend, Wild Card Weekend, whatever. Bills move on. They're the hottest team in football. I'd be shocked if they don't at least make the AFC Championship. Then we move on to the afternoon game with the first NFC matchup of the weekend with the Rams and the Seahawks. Now, this is going to be the third time we've seen this year. They're in the NFC West, and they've been battling all season long to see who gets that first first place in divisional title. Now, to me, no matter what happens, and this is probably the most distant I feel with a playoff game this weekend, I don't care who wins. I honestly think it's a toss-up because of how inconsistent the Rams are, how every year the Seahawks always seem to have a great record, but they always are missing something and they fall short. There's nothing different about the Seahawks team this year. Like, their defense has been playing better as of late in the last month. But when you have Andrew Whitworth coming back for the Los Angeles Rams off the IR, and their offensive line together as a unit has just played so much better than they did last season, I don't see how the Seahawks get any pressure on Andrew Whitworth and that offensive line and whoever is under center. We don't know yet, and I'll get to that in a second. So that leaves the secondary to really man up, just play tremendous football, and get coverage sacks. I feel like that's the only way that you can get to the quarterback if you're the Seattle Seahawks. Jamal Adams, if you're going to send him on a safety blitz, that's been working a lot this season. And I feel like this is the moment to where Jamal Adams can really step up for his team and become the next Cam Chancellor for Seattle, like reminiscent of the 2010s, 2013, 14, 15. Like, those years were just phenomenal, and it was a lot to do with Cam Chancellor. So if you are Jamal Adams and you were traded from the Jets for 2 first-round draft picks, and everyone's thinking like maybe that's a little overpaying, this is your time to shine because you have a favorable matchup against a quarterback, whoever it is, whether it's Jared Goff coming off surgery of a broken thumb on his throwing hand, so that's not going to be nice, or if it's John Wolford standing at 5'4", even though he's listed at 6'1", he's not 6'1", and he didn't play that good in the final regular season game. They barely got past the Arizona Cardinals, who was missing Kyler Murray. I don't know what to think of this game because both sides have big flaws. If I'm the Rams, I'm seeing the Jets lost to where they got outplayed. I'm seeing inconsistent play all season long against good teams, against bad teams. Jared Goff is reliant on how good this team is. They're banged up, whether it's the running backs, whether it's the offensive line. Their defense is phenomenal. Their defense is going to win them games if they get far into these playoffs. But I just don't know if I can rely on the quarterback play, whether that's Jared Goff or John Wolford. I don't know if I can do that because the Seahawks defense is not the Legion of Boom anymore. But they don't really need to be. I mean, I would consider them at the same level as what the Arizona Cardinals defense is, who was playing bad football in the second half of the season. But their talent and the way that they get through games is very similar. And if you can only score 18 points against that Arizona Cardinals team, I'm not high on this Los Angeles Rams team right now. Same thing for the Seattle Seahawks. They're 12-4. Congratulations. And maybe if there was a crowd, maybe this would be a lot different for me. But I'm seeing a team that every year, Russell Wilson's the guy. Russell Wilson is going to win you a lot of games. And you may not have the best defense right now, but as long as you score over 30, which Russell Wilson can, you just got to dump it to DK Metcalf or Tyreek, or not Tyreek Hill, Tyler Lockett. Sorry, Jesus. But Chris Carson can't really stay healthy, but he's most likely to play in this game. I'm thinking that the Los Angeles Rams have a chance in this football game because they are going to win the battle up front. Aaron Donald, that defensive line, that front seven, in my eyes, is going to brutalize the Seattle Seahawks offense. I don't know how long Russell Wilson has to throw, but I don't think it's going to be for a long time. This is going to be a very reminiscent game of what we've seen out of the Seahawks for 5 years now, really, ever since they peaked in those Super Bowls. We see Russell Wilson ball out for the regular season, but once it comes down to the postseason, that offensive line shows that, once again, they don't get a prominent offensive lineman. They don't have a good unit, and it gets to the point to where you can't rely on Russell Wilson to do everything for you. And I feel like this is going to be the game for that. So if I had to pick, I think it's going to be an ugly game. Like, they had the game, whether it's the first matchup or the second one, where it was 20-9. I really think that's going to be the case here. And once again, whoever wins this game, it doesn't matter because they're not going to be threats deep in these playoffs. They just know each other so well to where they're going to play good football, they're going to play bad football. But when they match up against a Green Bay Packers team, a Saints team, or maybe even Chicago, who cares? I don't think they match up at all because the Rams are inconsistent. The Seahawks are always the Seahawks. They're always going to choke. So I think the Seahawks should win this game. I think the Seahawks should win this game. But if it's the Rams getting 6 sacks on Russell Wilson, then they win an ugly 15-12 game. I mean, I'm literally thinking that. Or it's like 18-12. Something to that nature of you're not going to have fun watching this game. It's going to be a typical NFC West matchup. So, cool, whoever comes out of it, congratulations. But it's just, this is your Super Bowl, really, if you're the Seahawks or the Rams. Excuse me. We end Saturday with the Washington football team hosting the Tampa Bay Bucks. Yes, they are hosting this game. If there's any team that's deserving to come out of the NFC East, and I say that with just the empty, just empty soul, it's the Washington football team. They were the most consistent team out of that NFC East, and that's not saying much. That Week 17 matchup against the Eagles was horrible to watch. And what's terrible about it is that the Washington football team needed to win that game. So in the most important and critical game of the season, how did Washington fare? They almost lost through 3 quarters of this game. They were only up by 3 before Doug Peterson decided to throw his job away and put in Nathan Peterman. Or Nate Sudfeld, sorry. I was thinking, they're all terrible quarterbacks. So, congratulations, you made the playoffs at 7-9. Now, the other 2 times, now that I'm thinking about it, the other 2 times to where a team came out of the regular season 7-9, they won that Wildcard Weekend. And I think one of them was the Giants. I know for sure the Giants were one of them. I can't forget the other one. It might have been the Giants again. I don't know. But NFC East, once again, with Washington. They're going against the Bucks. And this is where I'm like, okay, this can go 2 ways. This can be a blowout, as it should be, because Washington is just not talented enough to keep up with Tampa Bay. Yeah, I think Ron Rivera is a good coach, but I feel like he would get out-coached by Bruce Arians. That offense is, I don't know what to think. Alex Smith is a great story, but the way he's been playing, it's not to the caliber of what you want out of a playoff team. So I think it's just a mismatch for the Washington football team against the Tampa Bay Bucks, especially because they've been better as of late. They finally found their stride with Antonio Brown in the lineup, with Gronk in the lineup. And even though there's been inconsistency with Leonard Fournette, I think Rojo will find a way to really have a good game this weekend. But I feel like that defense is bound for a great game against this really lackluster offense for the Washington football team. Great players. I just think overall, I'm not a huge fan of this offense. So it could be like that. It could be a blowout, and Bucks put up 40, 44 like they have been multiple times this season. And Tom Brady once again proves that if you say his name like Chase Young did, well, you're going to get Tom Brady. Or it can go this way. It can go to where the Bucks come in cocky. They think that it's just going to be smooth sailing because it is the NFC East. And we see a really good offensive line struggle against this defensive line for the Washington football team. That's where it lies, 100%. If they can make it a one-score game, and you can put it up to Alex Smith to be like, just get us one drive. Just get us one drive. Keep us in this football game. Because that defensive line is just incredible to watch. And if Chase Young really wants to go off to Tom Brady, and you want to make the old man feel uncomfortable, that is the only way. And really, the matchup of the styles, when the Washington football team relies heavily on getting to the quarterback with that defensive line, if they can get multiple sacks, make you feel uncomfortable to where you do not have a pocket to feel comfortable in, where you have to roll out and make the plays on the fly, that's where Tom Brady could struggle in this football game. Because that Bruce Arians system is, we're going to wait because we have protection up front and go deep. We're going to let plays develop. We're not going to do these quick little passes. We'll eventually have to adapt if it comes down to that. But our game is we rely on the passing game down the field. 15 plus, 20 plus yards down the field. That's why Antonio Brown has been doing really well as of late. So what if that offensive line that is young and has been playing really well now matches up against a brutal Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne? Like, this could be a good thing for Washington because they're not going to give Tom Brady all that time in the world. They won't have that luxury because of how reliant, tenacious that defensive line is. So if they have to adapt and start going for the smaller throws, maybe Scotty Miller gets involved a lot more because they have to do a lot more of those quick passes. Maybe the Bucs offense will feel uncomfortable and they just won't feel at home as they have for a lot of these games this year. Because we've seen to where the Bucs look just off. And they're not getting those throws down the field. They're not making those throws down the field. And their execution is off. If the football team wants a chance in this football game, they have to get to Tom Brady. They have to. I just don't think Washington has enough to stop the Bucs from scoring 40. Like, if they can't get to the quarterback and it's really good protection up front, well, then see you later. Antonio Brown's going to have 30 yards down the field. Easy. Gronk's going to have that good matchup in the slot or on the inside to where he gets those 8-9 yards. And then Ronald Jones just gets it going. It's got to be early. It's got to be in the first few drives to where Chase Young gets to Tom Brady. Make him feel you so that way he has to overthink it as the plays develop. And if he gets uncomfortable, if he has to think too much, I feel like that's where Washington can keep it close and at least give themselves a chance to win this football game. Overall, I think the Bucs on the road, considering that it is Washington hosting this game, I do think that they will win this game. It's just a matter of how they look in this game. If they look inconsistent and off like they have in some other games against really good teams, I don't think the Bucs are a Super Bowl contender coming out of the NFC, but this is a very telling sign of where the Bucs are mentally going against Washington. So let's move on to Sunday, where I feel like these matchups are getting a lot better. And it starts off with the Ravens and the Titans. And I think just storyline-wise, we saw this game last year in the playoffs when the Titans beat the Patriots, and we're like, wow, that's a really good game for them. At least they get onto the next round. We start to see the new era of the Kansas City Chiefs and post-Patriots dynasty. Well, they made it apparent that they weren't just a one-hit wonder. They went into Baltimore against the best team in the NFL, really, at that time, against Baltimore. And they just completely dominated with Derrick Henry. And still, Derrick Henry is dominating the NFL. He went over 2,000 yards this season. I just feel that this is the dynamics are switched. I feel like the Titans were the hot team coming to the playoffs. I mean, since week 11, where they put in Ryan Tannehill, they could not be stopped because of that running game. And their defense was better than it was this season. Well, the Ravens were the cocky number 1 seed. And it was like, no one's going to touch us. We run the ball. We're going to get over 200 yards rushing. No one can get us. It's Lamar Jackson MVP season. And they just got punched in the face and saying, no, Derrick Henry's going to stiff arm Earl Thomas to the ground, and you won't even see it coming. Well, this season, the Ravens are the hot team coming into the playoffs. They won 5 in a row and some really quality wins out of that. Lamar Jackson is not only running the ball efficiently, J.K. Dobbins is playing really well, and that whole running game is doing what they do. But their passing has been better. That I say it all the time on this podcast, and I sound like a broken record here. It's not about the running game for Lamar Jackson and the Ravens offense. It's about the passing game. How can you get it going in the air? Because we've seen them be the 1 or 2 overall best running team in the NFL, but then they're also the 28th, 29th passing team in the NFL. It just doesn't make sense to be a strong contender, not just in the AFC, but in football, if you cannot rely on the passing game once the running game does not fit to the game. I mean, if you're one-dimensional, yes, it is the best one-dimensional system in the NFL, but not every Sunday it's going to work. You're going to have a quarter or two to where that doesn't flow as well. And that's what happened in the Kansas City Chiefs game this year, last year, and in the Titans game last year. Once the running game isn't all there and you force Lamar Jackson to throw and make plays with his arm, he's not as comfortable yet to make those throws. But in that 5-game winning streak to end the regular season, I'm seeing Lamar Jackson more confident in his throwing ability. And I think that he's always had that. He's always had that ability to throw down the field. But once it's just frustration kicks in against really good teams like we saw against Kansas City, I feel like Lamar Jackson just beats himself. And it's hard to get back into the football game and focus when it's not going your way, when you can't do all your stuttering, all your fancy footwork. Once you don't feel yourself, I feel like Lamar Jackson is one of those guys that it's hard to come back from that. It's hard to adapt. Recently, he has been doing really well in the passing game. They may not have the best receivers. And I think Willie Snead, I forgot his injury report. He is questionable for this game with an ankle injury. So that's going to leave it up to Hollywood Brown, Mark Andrews, and probably Dez Bryant out of all people. So he finally gets to be back in the playoffs. He didn't see a lot of it in Dallas, but he will with Baltimore. So with the Baltimore Ravens red hot in this game, the Titans, who have a really good offense, but their defense was what's really killing them in a lot of these games this season, it's a tough matchup. Because if the Ravens get the ball rolling with a running game and they establish a passing game, just some of it. It doesn't have to be the 30-yard bombs down the field. It can be just those out routes, those seam routes, or even just a crossing route to Dez Bryant. I mean, Willie Snead will really help with that. But look, I think this offense will get going really well against this Tennessee deflating defense that can't get to the quarterback. So that really sets up the running game well. Now, the only thing really is Baltimore has a lot of these guys questionable due to injury. Cornerback Marlon Humphrey, who would most likely set up with Corey Davis or Jonnu Smith. because Marcus Peters will line up with A.J. Brown, which is a very intriguing matchup to watch. But Marlon Humphrey on that number 2 spot, Corey Davis is just up and down. He may have a 150-yard game. He might have a 50-yard game. But having that second cornerback is important, especially with Marlon Humphrey, who has been an amazing top 10 cornerback in the league this year. And he got paid really good money because of his play on the field. And then you also have Yannick Ngakoue with a thigh injury. He's questionable in this game. Cornerback Jimmy Smith to go along Marlon Humphrey. That could be a nice thing for the Tennessee Titans. And I'm not going to count out the Tennessee Titans whatsoever because their offense is that good. I'm just looking at a team that struggled really against the good teams in the AFC during the regular season. And then to end the regular season itself, you let Deshaun Watson and Houston Texans just ball out against you, and you squeak by with a terrible secondary play by the Houston Texans, and you win by a field goal. Look, your defense is going to cost you this game, but I feel like the Ravens are under the radar. They're the dark horse in this AFC to where everyone forgot about them. They don't have that target on their back. They can just go into this game, and this is a must-win for Lamar Jackson because of his performances in big games. But I feel like he will do a good job in this game. It's really when it goes down to against the Chiefs or the Bills. That's where I'm going to rely on Lamar Jackson to be the MVP Lamar Jackson. I want to see it there. You may not need to do it in this game against the Titans because your offense can flow against a bad defense. I'm just more worried about the future of how you can play, if you can withstand a critical situation against good teams in the AFC. So ultimately, I think this will be a high-octane matchup. I think this will be really fun to watch, probably the most intriguing game to watch this weekend. And it has to do a lot with the offenses. But I think that the Ravens' defense has been stepping up as of late. And they really found their stride midway through the season. And their expectations of what they should be on defense really came together. So Derrick Henry against Calais Campbell, Yannick Ngakoue if he does play, and that secondary, we'll see what happens. I do think Derrick Henry can put up a lot of yards in this game. But I think that Houston Texans game really showed that even if he does get over 200, 250 yards, well, you still have a chance to win this football game because their defense is going to allow that many rushing yards, that many passing yards. So, Ravens, you don't have to take the deep shot down the field. Control the clock. Get Derrick Henry off the field as much as possible. I know it's hard because you're just so flashy and you're just so high octane on offense. But if you can hold down Derrick Henry for just a few more minutes every quarter, that's going to win you some football games. And I think the Ravens take it. I like the Titans. I think Mike Vrabel's a good coach, and their offense is one of the best in the NFL, and they're so balanced. I just think that they're going to get outplayed in this game by a full, complete Ravens team. Saints and Bears. Now, I was on the bandwagon here of Chicago Bears pulling out the upset. I thought out of any team that could pull off an upset this weekend, it would be the Chicago Bears. So what I did is I went back to that Week 8 matchup with the Saints and the Bears at Soldier Field. It was where Nick Foles was playing. It wasn't Mitchell Trubisky. David Montgomery wasn't playing as well. He wasn't really even the starter at that point. They were putting in David Montgomery. They were putting in Cordell Patterson, I believe. I mean, they were putting in some different guys. And this was a time to where they were just getting on their slump. They started the year 5-0, and they started losing 2 in a row. And at that point, they were finally realizing that Nick Foles just isn't the guy. They need to establish a running game, and their defense can't be on the field that long against good offenses. They finally found their stride in the final month of the season. And out of anybody, Mitchell Trubisky shows that he is a competent quarterback. And David Montgomery has been playing really good football as of late. But the reason why that game stood out to me was like, I remember that game being so scrappy and kind of ugly to watch. I felt like Chicago was leading a lot of that game, even though Drew Brees and Alvin Kamara were in the lineup, I just didn't understand why the Saints were struggling so hard in this game, considering that this is when they really found their stride as well on defense. And then I started watching the game. I'm like, oh, yeah. Hi, buddy. I apologize. My nephew walked in. Where was I? Oh, yes. The fact that the Saints had no wide receivers in this game. Michael Thomas was out, and Emmanuel Sanders was out as well. So they heavily relied on Latavius Murray and Alvin Kamara to gain a lot of the yards in this game. And that was very easy for the Chicago Bears defense that is good to game plan against. And so I was like, okay, that makes a lot more sense. So now that the Saints will have Emmanuel Sanders, who's been building a nice relationship with Drew Brees finally, Michael Thomas is reported to play in this game. He still is dealing with the ankle injury, and he has been practicing. Now, that's going to be just a tough thing for Michael Thomas because he's rusty. You got to think he's rusty. He's not played much at all this season. And when he is, he's not that efficient. But he's been dealing with the injury over the last month, and an ankle injury for a wide receiver is tough enough. But guess what? You're going to have to go against some really good cornerbacks in Jalen Johnson and Fuller. Like, that is not something you want to come back to if you're Michael Thomas. So it's really up to Emmanuel Sanders and Alvin Kamara to really get it going for this Drew Brees-led offense. So do I think that the Saints are the better team? 100%. But I'm just looking at the history of the Saints, and I'm saying, look, they just don't catch a break in the playoffs. Last year, we saw it with Kirk Cousins and Minnesota Vikings. The other previous years to where they don't get the calls. Chicago is now running the ball a lot better. I mean, they're so efficient with the running game and David Montgomery. Mitchell Trubisky is finally realizing his role in this team, and he's completing a lot of passes, is accurate with his passes, making good decisions, and they have some good wide receivers to go along with it. Darnell Mooney is questionable in this game, and I feel like that's going to be very important for their passing game down the field. But Allen Robinson is going to make it a audition for whether he stays in Chicago or he moves on to, let's say, a place like Miami. This is his audition, and he's got to step up if he wants a big contract next season. The Saints defense, to me, is probably the best in the NFL right now. But I've said it before. I don't think defense matters in this playoffs, especially down the stretch. So I'm looking at this matchup. I'm like, oh, maybe. Like, I don't know. I want to say Chicago pulls off the upset. I just have a feeling. I really do. Because I think I'm just not sold on the Saints. In previous years, I was saying to myself, the Saints, it's their year. They are the most talented and put together roster in the NFL. They should win championships. This year, I'm not getting that same feeling. I'm getting a sense that Drew Brees is just reaching the end. You know? Like, I think reports say that he is going to most likely retire after this year. So this is his last hurrah. It's really dependent on Alvin Kamara. It goes through him. Something tells me that Khalil Mack and that defense won't be on the field as much. That's why they've been winning more often. And if we're seeing a Mitchell Trubisky offense that is finding their stride, I'm saying just keep an eye on that matchup. The Saints are a 10-point favorite, which is high for a playoff game. So I could be very wrong here for an 8-8 team to beat a 12-4 team, but I'm leaning towards Chicago. Last game, and this is the most interesting one of all, just because of the situation right now. The Steelers versus the Browns. the Browns might not even have their head coach. As of right now, good news is that, well, actually the bad news is that there are players and coaches that are very important to this Cleveland Browns team that are on the COVID list. Kevin Stefanski, Joe Pitonio, Denzel Ward. Like, this is not a good look if you're a Cleveland team that made the playoffs for the first time in 18 years. Best or good news is that as of today, they reported that there's only one assistant coach that tested positive while the players tested negative. It is going to be a last-second thing if these players and coaches get in. The ones that tested negative today, if they can get in for the Sunday night matchup versus the Steelers. If there was no COVID situation outbreak for the Cleveland Browns, I would say they beat the Steelers. I think that in round one, the Steelers expect to win. And even though the Browns have matched up pretty bad against the Steelers in the 2 games this season, I felt like third time's a charm. I just felt it. But after Kevin Stefanski tested positive, Denzel Ward, Joe Pitonio, not having these guys and having the Week 17 matchup to where you barely beat the second team of the Steelers, you beat Mason Rudolph of all people. You don't like Mason Rudolph in Cleveland, and you barely beat him by 2. I can't go with the Browns, man. Like, I want to so bad. But the Steelers are going to have Big Ben in the roster. They're going to have all their superstars out there. It is hard for me to say that the Steelers are going to win this game, even though they should be a first round out. Like, they really should. Once they go against the Bills again, once they go against a good AFC team, they are not going to stand a chance, in my opinion. But Kevin Stefanski not being there, you lost. That's the whole point of this rebuild in Cleveland. This is the reason why they found success and go 11-5 this season. Is because of Kevin Stefanski and when he's brought this discipline, this new culture to this Cleveland team. Without that, you lost all hope. So why even think that this is a primetime game? I think you should switch them. I think you should put Ravens and Titans at the last spot on NBC and then put the Steelers and Browns just to get it over with. But if you're thinking that, like, if you're Kevin Stefanski and you're saying, look, we've tested negative all these tests, like, please don't take us out of that primetime game because we will probably make it for that game. It's like an injury report. Excuse me. But it's hard to judge how this game goes with a lot of the premier players for the Browns not being in this game and their head coach. Their head coach, the guy that leads them, that's led them to 11-5, that has built a whole new culture. Without that, how do you think you're going to fare? I think their special teams coordinator is going to be the interim head coach for this game if Kevin Stefanski can't go. I just think it's going to be too much. It's not going to be a Steelers win. Like, it's not going to be impressive. It's just going to be the Browns, just Browns. Poor Cleveland, man. Like, Juju literally disrespected Cleveland by saying, it's the Browns. We're not worried. Like, if you had everybody and you had no COVID situation, wouldn't you just want to beat Juju once? But no, we're going to get an extension on Juju Smith and his TikToks. Great. I'm ready for the matchup in the divisional round. That's what I'm all for it. Like, I'm really intrigued by the Ravens and Titans. And then the Bears maybe pulling off the upset against the Saints. But other than that, all these other games, I'm kind of just like, eh. Like, I know who's good. I know who's bad. And these other matchups, like the winner of the Browns and Steelers won't win in the next round. The winner of the Bucks and Washington won't win in the next round. And the Rams and the Seahawks won't win in the next round. It is ultimately up to the Bills and the Saints this weekend to just get past it. That's all you got to do. Get past it. And then you got the real test next week. These other teams, just enjoy your extra week of practice. All right, people. That's going to do it for this episode of the Boba Let Sports Podcast. Not my favorite, because I don't like doing them alone anymore. But due to unfortunate circumstances. It is what it is. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And we'll see you next time. Next week on the review of these games on the Bubba Let's Sports podcast.
Yeah, hold on. Tell me who's your top 5 quarterbacks right now, dead or alive, huh? And how much do you care about a ring if the best player got carried by the team? Now, would you lose if it been a better draft?